This week on The Futurists, Dan Jeffries.
I don't think that there is anything in the world that does not benefit from more intelligence. There is nobody out there saying, I wish my supply chain was dumber and I wish drugs were harder to discover and cancer was more of a problem.
Hi there, and welcome back to another episode of The Futurists. I'm Rob Tercek with the world traveler, Brett King, back on the ground. Hi, Brett. Good to see you.
Yeah, back home, so that's great.
Super.
Good,
Nothing
good
like
trip.
flying back and getting to record a podcast first thing in the morning, but great to see you. Great that you're back. So
I think I've got a podcast recording every day this week. So
wow, you're prolific. Speaking of prolific, here comes a really, really bad transition. Speaking of prolific, our guest is a prolific writer, an author who's been talking and writing about the future and about AI for quite some time. Though he can go very technical, he's also created a tutorial for people called Learning AI If You Suck at Math that has been wildly popular. Some of his posts have been read 5 million times. And today he is the managing director of the AI Infrastructure Alliance. And you can find him on Substack, where he writes the Future History newsletter. So give a big welcome to Dan Jeffries. Hey, Dan.
Welcome,
so it's
Dan.
great to see you. We were introduced by a mutual friend. I was ventilating to that friend about the doomsayers.
Yeah.
All the fear and anxiety it seems to be getting drummed up about artificial intelligence. When it's a new technology that presents all sorts of uncertainty and all sorts of change, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the end of the world. Now, can you comment on that? Because I know you've written prolifically on that topic.
Well, I mean, the end of the world, we've been doing the end of the world for 2 million years, right? It's whether it's boulders from heaven or aliens or the gods
steam-powered looms,
That's right.
The Luddites,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the gods were going to kill us, the tides were going to kill us, everything's always going to kill us. We got this kind of doomsday cult rising up now about artificial intelligence. In artificial intelligence, it's strange, right? We like to think of ourselves as totally unique, the only sort of super intelligent creature on the planet. And so the idea that there's another thing that could be intelligent is scary to some folks, and it's kind of jumped the shark into let's bomb all the data centers, kind of thing with, Udesky's Time article. Humans have always with 100% success rate adopted technology because it's not outside of themselves. It's not outside of us. It's a part of us. It's a reflection of us, and we adapt to it and we adjust to it. It doesn't mean there's never any bumps in the road. There are, but the idea that this time is different, I don't know. I'm going to go bet with like 2 million years of history at this point. Maybe it is different, but maybe a boulder will come from heaven and smash the earth too. I think the probability is pretty low.
I think the thing that's different this time, you've already said that the one thing that's different is, we've never had to compete with another intelligence on the planet. That's the equivalent of ours. I think we do a very poor job of recognizing the intelligence of other creatures that already exist on the planet, incidentally. But the amplitude of change this time, if you like, comes for me from the effect it's going to have on conventional philosophy around things like capitalism and governance and so forth, right? Particularly, I mean, if you look at Adam Smith, you look at, how we respond to supply and demand economics, as demand for a product goes off, it's more workers get thrown into the mill, right? That's how we've handled it. For the first time, we have a technology in the last 300 years that is going to break that pattern potentially or significantly change it, where we will no longer require human workers to produce things. And particularly if we start getting closer to AGI, although we don't need that, the potential for AI to disrupt a wide range of employment simultaneously is fairly significant. So I understand why people are freaking out, but
is it though?
Having
that's
said
the open
that,
question. Is it though?
Is it what?
Like, it is the potential for massive disruption, just, is it a fantasy, or
Right.
or is it a real
Right.
thing, right?
Okay.
I mean, and like, I look around, and whenever I have a problem trying to understand something, I try to ground it in reality, right? And so I look around now, and I've been reading, robots take all the jobs. I mean, you just Google that job, you Google that story, right? And there's a million articles with the same title that could have been written by ChatGPT. So when I think about this, I go, okay, but what's happening in reality? I see, I don't know, 100 million people using ChatGPT in 2 months. I see VCs pouring a ton of money into it. I see a whole bunch of new companies. I see a whole bunch of new academic, economic activity, right? So the job thing hasn't quite materialized. Now, it could still materialize, but I would also add, we've already destroyed all the jobs in history multiple times, right? There used to be 100% of people worked in hunting, gathering, or agriculture. Now it's 3% of the planet, right? I know that, you flick on the light switch, and that unfortunately means that, all the whale hunters are out of business. And, but I don't know that anybody is clamoring for a return to whale hunting so we can kill them and dig the white gunk out of their heads. I'm sorry that the lamplighters are gone. But the thing is, like, this change doesn't happen instantaneously, right? Like, there's disruptions. The idea, though, that this is some sort of exponential, explosion that could take off in a way that we couldn't fully understand, I suppose it's possible. Mm-hmm. But I see just as many trajectories in the future where the current technology is disrupted, right? Like, either we have a breakthrough in alignment, or, I don't know, Auto GPT has a 15 to 30% error rate.
Yeah.
In terms of its logic, there's no guarantee that we can solve that problem tomorrow, right? So I think there's certainly a chance for kind of an exponential explosion of recursive intelligence, but I don't know. It's like, sometimes when I look at these things and they go, oh, ChatGPT is going to escape. I'm like, where's it going to escape to? Another 8-way H100 cluster with 8 terabytes of RAM, like a Kubernetes cluster and a vector database on the back end, right? Like, I just don't understand.
Yeah,
like, it's like people think of a human.
I don't even think the ChatGPT thing is an issue. I'm not sure that that ChatGPT is or that underlying technology is what's going to lead us to AGI. There's a bunch of other types of AI pursuits that are currently in development that could potentially lead down those paths. So it's I think the conversation around ChatGPT is an issue.
The hype right now is that Microsoft released this paper, research, theoretically a scholarly research paper, talking about sparks of AGI, and that's really what triggered this concern about general intelligence. First of all, I don't buy it. Secondly, even the people who wrote it, they said, look, here are some criteria, which you can object to. Like, they set forth their criteria. That was very fair. And it says it doesn't meet all of them. It meets some of them. That's why they say it's sparks of general intelligence. And so I guess the fear there, Dan, is that we're going to see some emergent behavior that we previously didn't assume. If the model's large enough, we know that there are emergent behaviors. Yeah. And so some people are saying, well, could general intelligence emerge? I think that's a pretty big leap, or fairly low probability. But just this week, there was an article with Nick Bostrom in the New York Times where he talked about emergence, and he said, look, if you can accept the premise that there might be a small amount of sentience, that something could have a small percent, like an animal. Would you say an animal has some self-awareness? Well, sure, you probably would go with that. Would you say a plant does? Well, no, but it responds to light and dark. Well, maybe it does. Maybe. So if you can follow that logic, then you might say, well, then these emergent systems might actually have some level of self-awareness, some small degree of sentience. What's your perspective on that? Because I think that's where you get on that slippery slope where it's like, you can't just say it's zero probability.
Well, it doesn't scare me. I mean, look, I think there's lots of different kinds of intelligence. I mean, we don't necessarily think of a squirrel as intelligent, but, try to keep that squirrel out of your garden and you'll realize how intelligent that squirrel is, because it's optimized to get into your garden, right? So there are lots of different kinds of intelligence in the world. We're not the only creatures on the planet that have intelligence. We have different kinds of intelligence. And so that's one thing. The second thing is, if you look at the emergent capabilities, and obviously, as the large language models have been scaling up, there's a great graphic I've used where it kind of shows a tree blooming that came from the palm paper by Google, and it like shows different emerging capabilities, chains of reasoning, understanding a joke, etc. Generally, that's been more beneficial or complex emerging capabilities, right? So yes, it's possible that we get a kind of artificial general intelligence out of these just massive scale, right? And I've actually thought that one of the ways we possibly get there is some kind of connection to the connectome projects where they're trying to map the entire brain, and maybe we just have enough compute essentially to simulate it. Now, people have tried that before, but they tried it probably before we had a deep enough understanding, and at some point you just reverse engineer it. You look at it and go, well, that's lighting up over there. Like, people worry about that because they go, oh my God, it's a black box. I'm like, well, you're a black box. You don't know how you made decisions yesterday. I mean,
we don't know how consciousness works today.
Right. But we use black boxes all the time. People made bread for 2,000 years. They couldn't see yeast. They didn't know that what was happening below the thing. So, but they understood the outcome. So I think when I see these kind of scary things from Bostrom and everything, the paperclip maxifier, I go, man, this is like a complete, this isn't scary. I mean, this is a complete like breakdown of critical thinking ability. Like it's basically an AGI Python script gone wrong. Like if we have these complex emergent capabilities, wouldn't we have complex, intelligence that emerged as well, more likely than like a Python script gone crazy? Wouldn't we have other intelligences that are able to look at it as a watcher and contend with it, other human beings and augmentation and a million other things that like interrupt the flow of like the stupid thing turning the universe into paperclips? It just, to me, I've looked at these things and I go, man, you start off with some really interesting ideas. Alignment is hard, right? Like, you don't necessarily have values and alignment and intelligence linked up. But at the same time, I look at it and go, yeah, but I mean, you're going to tell me that something that's super intelligent is going to go worry about maximizing paperclips? It's not just going to spawn a Python script to do it itself. I mean, I'm pretty smart. I probably would just spawn a Python script to do it myself, rather than spend all my time obsessing about it.
It's a good point. All these AI doom scenarios where the fear is a general intelligence that gets out of control or a super intelligence, they all require that super intelligence to be stupid in one unique way, like the paperclip maximizer, which for the people who are listening, that's a premise that was put out there that if you wrote an artificial intelligence that was optimized to generate paperclips, it would start to look at all the resources in the world, including human beings, as raw material for paperclips. And then it would go out of control and just turn everything into a paperclip. So that's not really intelligent. That's kind of like a massive blind spot that you would call, artificial stupidity, I think. So all of these doom scenarios require that we assume some massive flaw or some massive blind spot. Now, to the extent that we're monkeying around with black boxes, we do have the blind spot. That's a reality, right? We don't know. Yeah. The emergent capabilities that we've seen so far with large language models, those were unpredictable, including writing code. That was not something that was written. Nobody designed that into the system that emerged.
The one thing that is interesting with some of the AI that we've seen, if you read Eric Schmidt and Henry Kissinger's book on the Age of AI, they have some excellent examples of this, right? Where AI is already doing things outside of the bounds of human logic. So there is an element of, we are getting some results out of this that we didn't necessarily expect, and we can't explain exactly how it happens in those algorithms, but we do see evidence of that already,
Yeah, that's been well documented with ChatGPT and now with GPT-4. New capabilities seem to arise all the time, like every week, which is exciting.
Scaled up.
We've never had a machine that can improve itself.
It's also cool to have something that competes with humans that makes us rethink our logic, and I don't necessarily think when we talk about alignment, Dan, the AI pause letter, which everyone's been talking about, obviously, from the Future of Life Institute, I think it is, that published that. Which, I've got some questions about that as well. But when we talk about alignment, the view that if we don't set some regulatory guide rails, if we don't set ethical standards for AI to operate within, that we will never be able to claw it back. I don't necessarily agree with that either. But this issue of alignment, and if we are looking at the emergence of something that will compete with us in terms of intelligence, then isn't it reasonable to have AI, at least attempt to get AI to work within some sort of ethical constraints that fits human values?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of people working on the alignment problem. We don't need a pause, right? Like DARPA's poured money into it. Anthropic is working on, useful things right now. Reinforcement learning with human feedback, reinforcement learning with AI feedback, where you have another model critiquing it and like aligning it to a constitution. We're going to see more and more of these kinds of things. There's AI middleware coming that kind of keeps things on the guardrails. There's lots of stuff. It's not like suddenly people just started thinking about this. And
I think
like,
we're probably going to need AI to regulate AI, actually.
I think
right,
you're right.
You're going to have watcher AIs, right? You're going to have watcher AIs. And see, and that's going back to even an earlier part before we go too far down the alignment thing. The other major mistake that I think a lot of these super intelligence gone crazy things make is what I call like the classic sci-fi problem, right? It's like in modern sci-fi, multiple people have a computer, right? It's not very interesting if one person has the cell phone. But in classic sci-fi, like one guy would have the submarine and there's no other submarine on Earth, right? And that's not how technology develops. We're going to have lots of different AIs. We're going to have lots of different like minor models watching the other ones, right? People go, oh my God, they're going to use it to like write attack programs and malware. And I'm like, sure, we're also going to have AI programs that are like stopping the malware and recursively fixing the code in real time, like faster than any human could, right? Plugging the hole.
This is how AI is used already, right? So already, most people don't realize it because they're not consumer-facing applications of AI. But when you use search, when you're placing ads, when you're getting a recommendation on Netflix,
when you're using your credit card,
when your email is being screened for spam, there's an AI at work in the background. The only thing that changed here is that with ChatGPT, they put it in front of people and you can talk to it. And that was definitely cool and definitely weird and new and startling. I haven't seen a job that it can replace yet. I've been studying ChatGPT and I'm trying to say like, okay, here's the job that is going to go. At first, I thought it'd be copywriters, but actually the copy that I write, like the advertising copy, it writes spam and it's being used for that. So it'll generate a lot of spam, I guess. You think, well, maybe legal writing can go. But at the end of the day, you're still going to need a professional attorney. So this might be something that helps that attorney generate drafts faster. Maybe it'll make the law cheaper, but you're not going to replace that attorney with an AI anytime soon. And even coding, as you said earlier, it generates code. That's incredible. And sometimes it works. Cool. But if you don't know what you're doing, you can't use that code because you have to double check. I think you even wrote a blog post about that where you have to go back and look at a bash script and make sure that it does what it says. You can test it, but that requires a human being who knows what he or she is doing.
But the top, if you look at the top coders, and I'm basically, if I fire up a company like I'm thinking of doing, I'm going to require the coders to use this stuff to do the high level thinking. We're going into a Centaur era where you do a lot of the logic, and I've read blog posts from some amazing coders written millions of lines of code, and they're doing the high level thinking. And to them they're getting 5 or 6 things done a day, right? They couldn't do a tool in the past because they couldn't explain it to their bosses because they didn't understand why you'd write a tool. Now they can write 2 tools a day. They can do 2 or 3 PRs, and at the end of the day they're not blown out and exhausted. One coder wrote that it was like chatting with a buddy half the day, right? And I look at it and I go, I have a friend who's started writing a blog, and she speaks like 5 languages, right? And English isn't her native language, so a lot of times she would, write it. She can think very well, but she would write it, and she'd, have ChatGPT look at it, and then, or I would look at it. Well, she wrote a blog post that was pretty good. And immediately, me as a professional writer, I looked at it and knew what was wrong. It was using like very essay-like word choices, like individual instead of people or we, right? The language, there were too many be-verb constructions. All the paragraphs were the same size instead of varying it, which makes the eye get tired. Now, that's like 20 years of experience of writing. I immediately said, go back, make it more colloquial, get rid of words like individual, tell it to use colloquial language. And, she did that. And then immediately it came back with a better version. And still, like the punchline, I looked at it and was like, okay, wait a minute, it doesn't really slam at the end. Like, how can I make that work? So I think actually the most skilled people are going to have a level up, and then people go, oh my God, a 10x programmer, it's going to make the junior programmer invalid. No, that's going to make the junior programmer 10x and the super programmer 100x.
Mm.
right?
Yeah, I think it's man plus machine right now rather than man
Yes.
versus machine. So people looking for that competitive commercial edge, they're going to be using AI to, reduce the cost of output, to expedite, performance, things like this. But, we're not at the stage where AI is taking jobs wholesale. But, we are also not preparing for that transition. I agree with you somewhat, Dan, that and this is what I'd like to get into after the break, but that we've always adapted, but we have seen the pain of adaptation in the past, and the concern here is that the speed of which when it is ready for prime time, and it is taking jobs, the speed with which it will be able to do that is the question, right? We're not doing a lot to prepare that transition. If we do have large scale technology unemployment because of AI, what's the government's policy on that? How are we going to deal with that? Do we ban AI? Do we come up with universal basic income? What are the strategies? So should we be planning for this disruption, or do you think it's just, we just let it happen and respond in real time?
I mean, I think we let it respond in real time. I mean, we're talking about regulating something that doesn't exist. We're talking about a fantasy problem. And I think this is a change in our thinking in general as a society, right? Where we're like, well, the kitchen knife manufacturer can't put out the kitchen knives unless they can guarantee nobody ever gets stabbed with it. Like, it doesn't matter that 99% of the people are going to cut vegetables with it, right? And we didn't used to think that way. Like when they did have a pause in genetics, they came up with a policy that said you actually had to, prove harm. Today we use this harm very loosely, right? It's like if I stab you in the chest, that's harm. If I won't rent you because of your skin color, that's harm, right? But if I make off-color joke or insult your religion, that's not harm. You may not like it, but that's not harm, right? So when I look at these kinds of things, I go, we have to be able to deal with these things in real time. We have to be able to prove that something actually happened. And a bunch of people writing a bunch of papers about something that's supposedly going to happen. The population bomb was pretty sure we were going to run out of food, right? And like the current trajectory, it couldn't see the green revolution around the corner that changed the trajectory of the future, right? And if we'd all prepared the regulation for the fact that like 2 million people were inevitably going to starve, that regulation would look pretty absurd.
That's a fair point.
Today.
Yeah. That's a fair point. Now we're concerned about whether the human race is going to shrink out of existence, right? Because the decline in population growth,
the demographic trends. So in the second half, we'll take this out into the future a little bit more. We'll start to look at where things are heading. Before we do that, though, we like to get familiar with you. We like to ask you a series of short questions that'll help our audience understand where you're coming from. So Brett's going to do that. He's going to ask you 5 short questions.
Now, I normally do this around sci-fi, Dan, but I'm going to make it a little bit more AI focused. So what was the first time you remember being exposed to the concept of artificial intelligence via TV, books, research?
College in the 1990s, and I had a torrent of all these old papers, the Perceptron and Lisp, and I just started reading them because I was really into computers, and I thought, gosh, there's something magic in here. I didn't know how to unlock it. I thought it was magic, and I read Neuromancer around that time as well, and I just fell in love with the concepts of what artificial intelligence would look like. Probably even goes back a little further to the Asimov series when I was a kid as well, right? But that was mostly a literary construct masquerading as artificial intelligence, but pretty cool one.
What technology do you think has most changed humanity?
No, I mean, there's no contest. The most important invention in history is printing press, right? It single-handedly leveled up the entire collective intelligence of humanity. It, kicked off the scientific revolution so that we didn't think witches caused storms. We could actually figure out what caused storms. We didn't think, daggers would bleed next to the murderer. We could actually figure out things like fingerprints to catch murderers. So to me, it's the most profound by a huge leap.
Yeah, we had someone else say printing press recently as well. I couldn't remember who it was, but they said the computers and the internet have just been an extension of that, which I think is interesting. Right. Name a futurist or an entrepreneur that has influenced you and why.
Futurist and entrepreneur. I don't know. There's so many interesting folks who've kind of been around over time. I don't know. It's maybe Linus Torvalds. I love open source, and Red Hat was a massive part of my career in my life. I went to work in Linux when a recruiter said, all the jobs are in Solaris, and I said it won't be here in 10 years, and they looked at me like I had two heads. So I think open source has changed the game in terms of software and almost anything else in my lifetime. It's been super exciting.
After the break, I want to ask you about open source and AI, but let's bookmark that for just a minute.
Sure.
And finally, what science fiction story is most representative of the future you hope for in respect to AI?
Oh, I've been writing a couple of short stories now because of the answer to this question is none, right? I generally think most of the stuff that's written about AI was written before AI exists, with no actual thing to tether it to reality. So they basically wrote either the robot buddy or the AI gone crazy or the homicidal maniac. So there's two villains, and it's basically just putting an antagonist in a metal body or a buddy in a metal body. But there's no actual relation to reality. So I think we're due for a series of stories that are now grounded in how artificial intelligence is actually developing. And I'd love to see an explosion of new science fiction taking into account like how it's really developing.
Awesome. Well, let's get onto it. That's it for the quick fire round. You're listening to The Futurists. We'll be right back after this break and a word from our sponsors. Provoke Media is proud to sponsor, produce, and support the Futurist podcast. Provoke.fm is a global podcast network and content creation company with the world's leading fintech podcast and radio show, Breaking Banks. And of course, its spin-off podcasts, Breaking Banks Europe, Breaking Banks Asia Pacific, and the FinTech 5. But we also produce the official Finovate podcast, Tech on Reg, Emerge Everywhere, the podcast of the Financial Health Network, and Next Gen Banker. For information about all our podcasts, go to provoke.fm or check out Breaking Banks, the world's #1 fintech podcast and radio show. Welcome back to The Futurists. I am your host, Brett King, with my co-host, Rob Tercek. One of the things we like to do is do a bit of a deep dive. So in respect to AI, one of the most vocal proponents/opponents of AI and its march of progress in recent times has been none other than entrepreneur Elon Musk. So he just announced some new moves in the space. Rob, what can you tell us about it?
So you're right, Brett. When it comes to AI, Elon Musk's fingerprints are all over it. There were reports last week and over the weekend that Elon Musk is relaunching his business X as X.AI. And he did just purchase 10,000 GPUs, graphical processing units, for a new generative AI project inside of Twitter. And that's to put that in perspective, that's about how many processors OpenAI uses to serve GPT-4. So it seems pretty clear he intends to create his own generative AI project. And he has been conferring with and actually hired one researcher from DeepMind to build a new AI lab. So it seems like he's embarked on this. Now, what's interesting about that is Elon Musk has also been an outspoken critic of AI, as you just pointed out. For many years, he's been tweeting and saying in interviews that AI is dangerous. He said AI is like summoning the demon and claimed that it's worse than nuclear weapons. And in 2017, he told state governors that AI is the biggest risk we face as a civilization. Now, what's interesting about that is that Tesla, which is one of the many companies he's the CEO of, Tesla uses AI. They have a very active AI development program. And during the last 2 years, Tesla has been celebrating AI Day. So that's, sort of like a thing they're very, very bullish on. Of course, Tesla vehicles are equipped with autopilot, which is a kind of AI, an onboard AI system that processes data from 8 different cameras on the car to generate a real-time 3D model that can identify vehicles and pedestrians and so on. And sometimes that system doesn't work. We also had some spectacular crashes with Tesla vehicles that have been using or relying on autopilot.
I can tell you that it's not ready for prime time yet in my Tesla Model Y.
In some respects, you could say for a guy who's been telling us that AI is dangerous for about 10 years, his company is responsible for more deaths at the hands of AI than any other company on the planet. So he's sort of like #1 right now in terms of killer AI. Now, interestingly, he's also one of the original founders and the original investor in OpenAI. He started that along with PayPal founders Peter Thiel and Reid Hoffman. And in 2018 or around 2018, he tried to take over OpenAI. Maybe it was 2017. And it kind of bungled, and the rest of the founders rejected it. And so they pushed him out. They had already been upset with him because he had poached some of the people from OpenAI to work on Tesla's autopilot. So he left. And at that point, he had made a pledge to contribute $1 billion to OpenAI so that they could scale up the training of their large language model for the very first version of GPT-1. But of course, when he left, he reneged on that promise. And that's what caused the new CEO, Sam Altman, to turn to Microsoft for funding and infrastructure support. So in a sort of a weird paradoxical way, he founded OpenAI, and then by leaving caused OpenAI to go partner with Microsoft, which of course he's been complaining about ever since, because he says, I named the company OpenAI, and now it's a closed for-profit company that's working with the most evil monopoly on the planet. So there's a complicated story behind all of that. And then in addition,
so it should have been his monopoly instead of theirs.
Well, so this is the thing, there's always a couple different angles, and they always seem to like conflict when it's about Elon Musk. So in addition to all that, he also was one of the most prominent signers of that famous petition from the Future of Life Institute. But that's not all. He's also one of the people who funded the Future of Life Institute. And he's a longtime supporter of Nick Bostrom. Nick Bostrom, who is the founder of FLI and also of the Future of Humanity Institute at Oxford. And in fact, Elon Musk introduced Nick Bostrom to Sam Altman at OpenAI. So like he's kind of the spider in the middle of the web. So a lot of people have speculated that.
So what's it all mean?
Well, they speculated that the reason he wrote that letter, the reason he signed that letter, was basically to buy a 6-month pause so that Twitter startup could catch up to OpenAI. Now, it's not just me that's saying that. His longtime friend and PayPal co-founder, Reid Hoffman, said that. He said he sort of mused out loud. They did an interview recently, and he said they asked him about Musk's reason for signing that letter, since he's already using AI in many ways. And Hoffman said, I think some of it's a little bit less well-intentioned, like everyone else slow down so that I can speed up. So yeah, that's Reid Hoffman's take on X.AI and Elon Musk's involvement.
Oh, he knows Elon pretty well.
That's for sure true. And so with that in mind, I was thinking it might not be a bad idea for us to just go back and recap that letter. Because Dan, that's when you and I were introduced them when that letter came out. So at that point, about 2,000 people had signed this petition asking for a 6-month pause. Today, as of recording, about 26,000 people have signed it. And of course, it's made zero impact in terms of slowing any company down. If anything, the companies are rushing. Just today, this weekend, Google has been announcing that they're doing everything they can to catch up to Microsoft. So it appears like we've got an arms race underway. Anything we need to be concerned about there with the arms race? Are these big companies likely to suspend their AI safety regulations or their ethical AI parameters? Are they going to just rush ahead recklessly and throw safety to the wind?
So there's a lot to unpack there. I would say, I tweeted the same thing that multiple CEOs, not just him, had, tweeted or had signed it in bad conscience, right? That they just like slow down the competitor so they can catch up because they were training their own LLMs, right? And I go back to, kind of a great person theory, right, as well. When you think about things like, how do you assess someone like Alexander the Great? Like, he's a mass murderer, or did he unite all of the world and like encourage different cultures to interact and like his soldiers to marry folks from different sides and like not murder the populace or whatever? The answer is both, right? It's like great people don't kind of fit into these boxes. So it's a bit like Logan Roy or whatever in Succession. It's like, is he a horrible, pompous son of a bitch? Is he also a person who like gets things done in an amazing way, puts together tremendous deals? Is he a person who, plays both hands to get what he wants? Yeah, that's what singularly powerful people do. So nothing. If you frame Elon from that perspective, it makes perfect sense, right? Like you play all the sides that you want. Now, get it back to the letter. It has zero impact. No one's about to slow down right now and do it. And I think the other thing is, I don't think people are slowing down their safety regulations. Again, go look at like they spent at OpenAI. They spent 6 months getting the model to be, hey, they had red teams on there, right?
Yeah.
They had, people like working to get the model more aligned. It's like 146-page paper, right, that I read through, where you look at the early things that it could do, right, where they tried to get it to, I don't know, say something anti-Semitic, right, but that doesn't get picked up by Twitter, and it would gladly give you that, or where you could buy illegal guns, and they work through all these things, and they're constantly upgrading the system to kind of deal with.
Arguably, that's why they made it open to the public, because we're all beta testing it.
You cannot fix things in an ivory tower. I don't know how we've gotten to this concept that you can fix things outside of the real world. Like, we put refrigerators out there, and then we realize sometimes the gas leaks and they blow up. That's a tragedy. It's horrifying. We're not happy about that. But you don't know that's going to happen until it happens. OpenAI spent a bunch of time worrying that it was going to be used for political disinformation, and it's been used for that about 0% of the time. They didn't see spam, right? They didn't see that coming, and that's been what happened. But that when they put it out there, that is like, humans are infinitely creative. We find exploits in political systems, in computer systems. We're massifying. They also didn't know what people were going to use it for positively. They didn't know anybody wanted to code with these models until they saw people coding with it, right? So the thing is, you have to put things in the real world, and yet today now we go, oh, it's got to be perfect, or you can't do it. Again, I take this idea of self-driving cars, like we talk about, okay, the Teslas have crashed or whatever. Look, I ask people, how many self-driving car deaths are going to be acceptable? Oh, 0. I go, okay, cool. Humans are absolutely terrible drivers. They kill 1.35 million people on the road every year worldwide.
Let's stop humans driving cars then, yeah.
Right,
exactly.
50 million people are injured. So if it cut that by half, or down to a quarter, that's 1 million people walking around
we
playing
apply
with
a
their
different
kids.
standard to the AI. Like, the AI has to be perfect or nothing, right?
Right.
Okay, but there is a group that is very concerned about something that we may consider a low probability. The three of us might consider low probability, but they say no matter how low the probability, it's something that we all have to take very seriously. In fact, for them, it's the number one concern. The group I'm talking about is the long-termists. That's what they're usually called. Often Nick Bostrom is considered to be kind of the ringleader or the brains behind it. He's the author of Superintelligence, a professor at Oxford, studying ethics of AI, among other things. And this group is really the group that's behind this petition. And their view is that we can't be messing around with a technology that, if it works, if it escapes, if it develops super intelligence, a lot of ifs, but there's a non-zero probability there. So it could happen. It might happen. And they're saying if it happens, then the most likely outcome is that it's going to exterminate humanity, right? This is probably best expressed in that Time magazine article by Eliezer Yudkowsky, who is a part of that group. And he said the letter didn't go far enough, so he refused to sign it.
It's such a human emotion, though, applying that logic to AI, right?
Well, let me direct it at Dan. I want to hear what Dan has to say, because Dan, tell us a little bit about this perspective from the Future of Life Institute, Nick Bostrom, and Eliezer Yudkowsky.
No, I think they use a lot of, like, the even sort of the blog Less Wrong comes from a critical thinking concept, right? So I think that they kind of utilize a lot of
Yudkowsky's blog for the folks who are listening. Less Wrong.
Right. So and that comes from the concept of, like, you make a less wrong choice. So, like, the way that you think about things is, like, if I'm doing a diet, I plan out all the healthy eating things and I count calories, but it inevitably fails because it's boring and it's a tedious, it saps the fun. So a less wrong choice is going to the grocery store, or going to the restaurant and just scratching off the burger and the fries and and getting yourself a salad, or and putting the dressing on the side, right? That's a less wrong choice, right? That's how you get closer. You can maintain that easier. So they've kind of co-opted that language and used a lot of that critical thinking, but in many ways, and sometimes I read Less Wrong, and a lot of the guest posts are good, but they kind of co-opted this language of clear thinking and corrupted it in kind of a Jonestown-y way, right? It's like, there's a way that it's like, we're going to get to this thing, and it's like, the more you study monsters, right, the more you start thinking that monsters exist. It's like you study the dark arts and you're suddenly Mad-Eye Moody looking around the corner all the time, right? Like my father always said, what you focus on expands, right? So you keep it becomes this inevitability. We're going to destroy it. But I think it's just based on a lot of weird sort of lazy assumptions. Like they talk a lot about these kind of, these really logical scenarios, but the more you dig into them and peel them apart and expose them to the light, they don't make a lot of sense. Like that example of the paperclip maximizer earlier, it sort of assumes that there's no other thing to interrupt the trajectory, or that we don't have any additional kind of development along the way. It's like, try to explain a web developer to an 18th century farmer. You can't do it because there's like 15 other technologies that develop that you can't see. So it's easy to imagine destruction. It's very hard to predict the trajectory of these things. And so I think that the probability is immensely low. And I think a lot of the reasoning is wrong too. When you look at the paper that came out that said, oh, it's selfish species is the nature of evolution. I'm like, really? I'm like, humans are the most collaborative species of like all times, right? Like we feel a kinship with 100 million other people, 200 million, a billion other people have nothing to do with us. It's called a nation state, right? Who you might not give the time of day to, but we take that very seriously. You work in a company. How many of those people do you actually like? Let's be honest, right? You probably have 2 or 3 friends there. The other ones you wouldn't give the time of day to, but you're all working towards a collective thing. And then they go, oh, well, other species don't collaborate. And I go, gee, I saw, there's like a shrimp that digs out like a hole in the ocean, and the goby fish goes into it. And the goby has great eyes, and the fish kind of, the shrimp cleans out the thing every day, and it's kind of blind, and the goby fish acts as a guard, and they both share this thing together. So look, it's based on these sort of weird, faulty assumptions.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like, I don't know, man. I mean, are we going to spend all of our time thinking about this, and then we're going to miss out on all the benefits of like it, better?
No, I agree. I agree absolutely with all of that, Dan. But there is a need for a new set of regulations around AI, just as there's been a need for data privacy regulations in recent times because of the abuses of people like, or organizations like Cambridge Analytica.
We'll get a pop-up in front of all the AIs, like, because that's definitely fixed the thing.
But we do need.
Saying was raised by there was one group that was very vocally against this letter, even though the letter aligned with a lot of what they had originally recommended. And the group I'm referring to is DAR, which is run by Timnit Gebru. And she was a former ethics researcher, AI ethics researcher at Google. And in kind of a story some may recall from a few years back, was fired in the clumsiest way by Google.
Yeah.
And then her boss, Margaret Mitchell, was fired just a few months later for similarly clumsy reasons. And the story just kept going on, made Google look really bad. No one really knows exactly what happened. There's more to the story. But at any rate, one of the reasons why Timnit Gebru was fired from Google is that she published a paper called Stochastic Parrots, and it's about these large language models. And many of the criticisms that she made, now looking back, because that paper was about 5 years ago, looking back, that actually was pretty accurate. Her forecast or her analysis was pretty accurate. And so it's a little weird. Again, it's a little weird that Google fired her. But at any rate, she came out and was very critical of this Future of Life, our Future of Life Institute petition, because she said all the attention, all the focus is going to go to this tiny possibility, this minute possibility of a super intelligent AI that's malevolent, that destroys humanity and so on. And now that's going to sort of redirect resources or distract people from the real issues. And what she feels are the real issues are the very real, tangible negative impacts, not just of AI, but of algorithms that are prevalent in society today. And she'll point to things like systemic racism or discrimination, or the ability, some people can't get insurance or car insurance or a car loan based on the zip code they live in because that's correlated thanks to some algorithm or something in their credit report that's correlated to the area where they live or their zip code. And so she points out that this kind of discrimination and unfairness already exists, and it's algorithmically reinforced, and it should be getting the attention of legislators and regulators, and it's not. And it's because of all this doomsaying that's worrying us about this sort of sci-fi scenario, this very low probability scenario in the future, that we're not directing enough attention to the very real but mundane
just
issue.
The problem of integration, right?
And the problem of equality and fairness and equal justice. And also there's a gigantic inequality issue too, because it's like, who has access to these tools? Who's going to get the benefit from these tools? There is going to be an economic boost. So I guess the point I'm making there is that, we talked briefly about this group that is referred to as the long-termists, or the philosophy is called long-termism. But I think there's a different group that's worth paying attention to, led by Timnit Gebru. And that is, you could call them the short-termists. They're the people who are focused on the issues of AI right now, today, that are real, that are going to be in the financial industry primarily, or the insurance industry, where algorithms are deciding someone's fate. And unbeknownst to them, it could be a kind of like racial or economic redlining that's occurring. So I guess there's two different perspectives on that letter, but that letter ended up generating so much controversy, and yet it achieved nothing, because here we have an arms race, and it's not just Google and Microsoft, who of course are in a death struggle over the future of search, the largest computing category in the world. But in the month of March, more than 150 other apps were launched. And now I want you to come back to that question right before the break I raised, which is the combination of open source and artificial intelligence should be a kind of turbo booster. And it might be the thing that prizes this technology away from those giant companies. What's your take on that possibility?
I love open source. I'm a big believer of it. I went to work at Red Hat, like I said, when there were 1,400 people. I was there for 10 years. I'm a big believer in it. And a lot of times when we look at artificial intelligence, I agree with it that long-termism or short-sightedism, as I call it, is kind of distracting us from sort of real issues. Whatever we think the real issues are, there's a lot of them, right? I mean, I can think of ones outside of just that was very a U.S. sort of centric based one, but there's other ones too, right? I mean, think about if we are good with alignment, can a totalitarian regime, utilize that, or the way it's kind of used to, keep track of, populations and those kinds of things. There's a lot of, potential negatives. When I look at sort of open source, now this is the other thing you've seen pushback from like corporations or governments on the open source. These things are too powerful, blah, blah, blah. And I go, well, yeah, I mean, when I look at something like Linux, though, right, the long-term possibilities or the things that it has done has been wonderful, right? And now Linux is used to attack things, right? It's used to do sneaking in and attacking people and penetration testing and all this kind of stuff, right? It's been used for malware. It's been used for all kinds of things. It's also been used in pretty much every supercomputer on the planet. If Microsoft had been successful at destroying it in the old days, they would have destroyed their new business model, because 90% of their cloud runs on it, right? Their supercomputers run on it, right? OpenAI runs on it. It's in every edge router. It's in, everything. Right.
So should we have open source AI? Because the folks at
100%.
OpenAI are against it. They're actually going the opposite direction. They're going for more closed.
Funny, given their name, right?
Info.
Yeah, I completely disagree. I mean, I think when you look at the research that's coming out right now with people, being able to find different ways to align it or adding adapters, to the different large language models, which makes them, faster to fine tune and easier to align in a lot of ways and give them new capabilities, right? Mm-hmm. All of these things are coming out of the open source community, and they're going to trickle back in. And you're already seeing that. You see, like with Stable Diffusion, right, all the communities are blending together models, 15 different models, and suddenly they're as good as Midjourney. You see all the research papers taking these things and utilizing them. So look, I always feel that open wins out in the long term. It might lose in the short term. It could be in an era of closed. But I think in the long term, the benefit of everyone being able to poke and prod it in and inspect it is more beneficial than a few folks having the keys to the kingdom.
So do you think some of the doomsaying and the fear and gloom mongering, do you think some of that is like a coded argument in favor of closed source and big companies, basically saying the only companies that we can trust to handle this stuff, because it's like kryptonite, are these very large established tech companies,
self-regulating companies?
Yeah, the so-called self-regulating companies. Right? It seems like a self-serving argument.
Yeah, I mean, there's always perspectives embedded in every argument, right? And one of them is that, we can't have open source AI because people are too stupid or too dumb or too dangerous to be able to do these kinds of things. And so we're going to have these kind of trusted center things, right? That are it's like, well, you mean like the people who are trusted to like keep our credit card data private and leak to half the United States or whatever? Like, so, and then the problem with this perspective of basically focusing on this centralized trust is that it's an oxymoron, right? Yeah. It's like once that's embedded into the system and that one entity that you put in charge of the trust fails your trust, because it's not a fixed thing. Trust is a moving concept, right? It's the people there. If I stack the EPA with a bunch of people who think environmental protection is nonsense, I've destroyed the concept of the EPA. If I have incompetent people in that trusted entity, suddenly that entity is no longer useful, and you can't rip them out of the system. So I favor the openness. Mm-hmm. I favor that kind of ability for lots of people to be able to poke and prod at these things. and build the technologies and also build the guardrails. And the guardrails work is happening in the open source community as well. And I think it's going to trickle
Yeah,
back to
that
the
could be
closed
part of
source.
the solution, actually.
So take
That's
us out
right.
to the future. Talk about recombinant artificial intelligence, where let's say it's more open. There are models, there already are models out there that people can use. And let's say that we're able to compress the language down so that you can run the AI on a smaller set of machines. You don't need $10 billion to
On your
set up.
smartphone, maybe.
Well, that's what's coming, right? So can you take us out to that future, Dan? Tell us what we might expect or what you imagine might be kind of exciting about a future where this is more democratized and more recombinant.
Yeah, I think we're going to have gigantic super intelligent models. I think we're going to have like medium-sized models, and then tiny models at the edge. They're all going to be communicating. I don't think that there is anything in the world that does not benefit from more intelligence. There is nobody out there saying, I wish my supply chain was dumber and I wish drugs were harder to discover and cancer was more of a problem, right? So like, to me, I see this kind of like embedded intelligence in every little aspect. You've got a million researchers. I don't see all the jobs disappearing. I just see an acceleration. I see the WhatsApp effect, right? Where like it used to take 1,000 engineers, now you can do it in 50, but it doesn't mean you have less software. It means you have more. So I think we're going to have more companies. We're going to have more varied jobs, or we're going to have some people who don't even need to work. And I think you're going to have this kind of ambient intelligence everywhere, right? Small models, huge models, like gigantic models. They're all going to be able to communicate. There'll be protocols. There'll be defenses. There'll be watcher AIs. There'll be regulation that's in there. But to me, every single aspect of our entire life is going to be upgraded intelligence. Like the packages are going to be smart. They're going to know where they're going. They're going to know how to reroute or call out for help. You're going to be augmenting like your old software tools with intelligence, and maybe it has a crappy interface. It doesn't matter anymore because you're just going to talk to it, and it's going to take care of that crappy interface for you. And it's going to speed up everything from drug discovery to material science to everything. And if we're lucky, we're probably going to have some breakthroughs that lead us to kind of things that we can teach very quickly through mimicry, the way we teach children. You can take them out in the backyard, throw them the baseball. They're probably going to figure it out in a couple of weeks. They may not go to the pros, but they're going to be able to understand it. I think people are working on things like that.
You already see that with people designing games,
right?
People who don't write code, who are designing games with ChatGPT, they say, no, not like that, more like that. They're using natural language.
Yeah.
And then the GPT rewrites the game for them, right? In real time, which is kind of astonishing.
The code's going to heal itself,
world, right?
I want to come back to your point about supply chain, because supply chain has been a focus of mine for many years. And it's not smart. It's a dumb supply chain. There's still people with clipboards and walking around with paper and checking items off of a list. Now, there have been many attempts to apply blockchain to supply chain, and they've mostly failed, hundreds of attempts. And one of the reasons for that is that supply chains are closed. They're not open by design. Walmart doesn't want an open supply chain. They're quite content to dominate the one that they have right now. And so blockchain and an open ledger doesn't really work in that circumstance. That said, there is a big effort underway that was accelerated during the pandemic to automate the supply chain, to apply robotics, automated systems all the way through, from factories to trucks to ports and even container ships. My thinking has been for a long time that blockchain is not for people. Blockchain is for the AIs, for one automated system to hand over to another automated system.
Same as digital money or CBDCs and tokens.
So money is just one thing that's being transferred, right? But there could also be pallets of goods or cars or ships and containers and so on. And so, for the human beings, these are black boxes. We don't actually understand how the AIs work, right? So we can't audit the thought process of the AI. So we need a verifiable way to look and say, okay, but did the goods actually get transferred and on what date? And that's where the blockchain fits in. So blockchain in this scenario is for the AI, and it's a way for the humans to govern the AI. I'm not quite sure that scenario is fully baked. What do you think of that? What's your reaction when I share that idea?
I mean, I've always felt like maybe blockchain's been one of the most disappointing technologies for me, because I've been a fan of it for a long time, and I felt like we've missed opportunities for like decentralized identification, and we spent. We don't even have things like, when you call your bank and you need to reset your password, you could automate that protocol of like, what's your dog's name and all that to reset your local wallet. We don't even have that kind of stuff. And I was writing about that 5, 6, 7 years ago. And so it's been disappointing to see like yet another clone of a coin. I think that people haven't leveled up to thinking about it as a protocol and as a way to do decentralized trust. And I think that decentralized trust machine in a hostile environment where people don't agree. It's a way to come to a consensus. And I think that is the exciting part of it. I like the idea of machines being able to communicate to machines. And I like them being able to verifiably extend information. I think we will eventually see good uses of the blockchain, right? In terms of like maybe with photos, like as soon as it comes off your camera now, we're going to need, a stamp on there that goes to the blockchain instantaneously, because you're going to need to be able to say this is a verified photo versus
generated by a human.
Right.
Yeah,
that's right. That kind of thing. So, I think that we're going to start to see real new uses for it. It's going to be exciting. But when going back to just the supply chain, we are going to see artificial intelligence baked into that at every step. From the robotics to like the tracking of things. It doesn't have to even be open for that to be the case, right? There are huge companies that serve, the shipping industry, and quite frankly, giant container ships are already basically automated. They're skyscrapers floating on their side, and they got like 10 people on them who barely touch the controls, right? So I mean, you mentioned this earlier, that there's a whole bunch of things that are basically artificial intelligence. And there's a joke in artificial intelligence that once it works, we don't call it artificial intelligence anymore.
Right.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
It's software. Yeah, then it's okay.
Just software. It's just software. It's fine.
Or an algorithm. Yeah.
Right. You talk to your phone, fantastic. That's AI, but it works.
Well, great fun talking to you, Dan, today. Thank you for joining us. Well, this is yet another episode of the Futurists. It's been a great pleasure to have Dan Jeffries on. Dan, what's the best way for people to find you on the web?
Twitter, Dan_Jeffries, the number 1. If you don't put the number 1, you're going to find someone who studies the asexual reproduction of tree frogs.
Nice. That could be interesting.
He's an interesting fellow. Dan Jeffries and I have had a couple of fun exchanges. Dan_Jeffries1 or Future History Substack is probably the best way to see my writings and the thing I keep most updated.
That's cool. Yeah, I found you on Medium and elsewhere. I think also Hacker Noon, but the most recent stuff, these really deep dives you've been doing into AI, quite interesting. And also you share a lot of technical acumen. You'll find that on Dan's Substack, which is Future History. Well, thanks for joining us. This has been a fun episode, and we enjoy this topic very much. We'll be sure to have you back for some more future history in a future episode. And folks, we want to thank the people who have been helping us make this show possible. That's Kevin Hershen, our engineer, and Lisbeth Severns, our producer, the whole team at Provoke Media. They've been very supportive of this show. And I want to thank our audience for listening. Thank you very much. We have been getting superb feedback from people who are listening to the show. It's growing nicely. That's been great fun to watch. And in fact,
we're going to hit 50K downloads this month. So
yeah, awesome. That's awesome. The introduction to Dan actually came from someone who I was talking to about the show and said, you should talk to my friend Dan. So that's how this came about. So we love that kind of feedback here and we welcome it. So please reach out to us on social media. Let us know if there's a question we should be asking or an expert we should be talking to. And in the meantime, we will be back next week with another Futurist. And until then, Brett, I'll see you
in the future.
Well, that's it for the Futurists this week. If you like the show, we sure hope you did. Please subscribe and share it with the people in your community. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. That really helps other people find the show. And you can ping us anytime on Instagram and Twitter at Futurist Podcast for the folks that you'd like to see on the show or the questions that you'd like us to ask. Thanks for joining. And as always, we'll see you in the future.